I realized that this is what love feels like, and that love actually came from the mountains. Sometimes we also don't think about age diversity. Going into these spaces to learn a new sport or a new activity can be intimidating when you have these incredibly able-bodied, young, sprightly people trying to lead you along the way. It felt important to me to represent women of a certain age.
What does it mean to say we're building a more inclusive snow sports community when the price of entry is still very high? I'm wondering how you're sitting with that contradiction.
Hello, lady. How are you?
Good morning.
Where are you going?
We are going to the hills. First day on the mountain. They not ready.
Yes.
3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to People, Nature, Big Ideas. I'm your host, Rhonda Lee Chapman, and today's episode is inspired by TPL's Happiest Outside campaign, which you might see on our social media feeds or in your TPL emails this month. And if you've been listening to this podcast, you might recall our Happiest Outside episode from last year, which was a lot of fun. And the idea behind the Happiest Outside campaign is really simple. Spending time outdoors makes us feel good. And when we feel good, we do good. And so throughout the month of April, we're sharing resources to help people reflect on and nurture their own joy outside and to share it with others.
Oh, hey, Whitney.
Yeah,
Over there.
Okay, you are cheer again? Or
Yes.
again?
Let's go.
I'm Issa Talija. I live in Berkeley, California. I'm from Seattle, originally from Nepal. What makes me happiest outside is being with community, and being here with Women of Winter has been so much fun, and being able to now teach skiing to communities of color and women is going to be so exciting. I really love falling and this sensation of trusting in the fall. So literally falling on the snow, falling into the support of the people around me and their knowledge and our collective wisdom and sense of adventure. All of that brings me a lot of joy and also makes me feel more resilient and risk-taking.
One of the places I'm happiest outside is in the mountains. And you might not know, though, that I've been snowboarding for over 30 years, and it brings me so much joy, which is why I've been doing it for so long. And that's especially true when I go to share these experiences with others. And I got to do that very recently when I went up to Big Sky, Montana. And I went up there to get my National Snowboard Instructor certification, and I did it through a project called Women of Winter. And initially, my goal when I set out to do that was just to get the certificate. I just had something to prove to myself. I wanted to know that at this stage in my life, I still got it. But what you can also imagine is that there was so much more meaning in the journey than in the destination itself, and that destination being just getting the certification. And so to help me unpack and reflect on that experience, which was super meaningful to me, I've invited my new friend to join me here today, and she is going to interview me rather than the other way around. With that, I will say, I feel like I'm not doing us a service because I should have on some gold sparkles. I now own gold sparkles because of this woman, and her name is Gabacha Moreno, and she's known to many simply as Gabacha. And she is a first-generation Mexican-American conservationist, an enthusiastic outdoor advocate, and a creator based in New Mexico. She also serves as the social media manager for Outward Bound USA in support of increasing outdoor education access for youth. She's also a member of the board of directors of The Outdoorist Oath, an organization that equips people to take action for planet, inclusion, and adventure. She's also an ambassador for Leave No Trace, helping people steward the outdoor spaces that we share. And now I'd like to announce too that Gabacha is a nationally certified ski instructor. She was also at Big Sky with me, which is how we found each other. We were strangers who shared a shuttle, a mountain, a mission, and as it turned out, a lot of the same dreams. And we shared gold sparkle. Gabacha, I'm just going to hand it over to you. The floor is all yours. Welcome. It is an honor to have you here. I'm super excited.
Rhonda, the honor is all mine. And yes, why are we not wearing our gold glitter right now?
I know.
We are the golden girls, you know. We shine, we sparkle, we bring the extra little joy. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm honored, number one, just to have met you and to have had the opportunity in that little shuttle ride to immediately know we are each other's people.
Yes.
And now we are here telling the stories and amplifying the impact so more people have access to the joy that we already experience when we're out in the mountains in the winter. So I have to say, Rhonda, when you first asked me to be the one asking the questions, I had to laugh a little because you are normally the one that holds the mic. So let me start as I think you would by saying TPL's Happiest Outside campaign is built on the idea that being outside changes us, changes you, changes me. And that's where we are most ourselves. This really resonates with me because I remember being a child with my first journal in my hand and writing how I felt so safe when I was just alone in nature. Because I got to be myself without the fear of judgment or the fear of discrimination or any of those things that made me feel like I didn't belong in other spaces. So to start, I would love for you to tell us, what does that actually mean for you personally? Where does that show up in your life?
Similar to you, while I didn't have a journal when I would go outside, I was really lucky to grow up in an area that was surrounded by nature. Just in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., in Montgomery County, Maryland. Back in the day when I was a kid, and I'll say before we had all the McMansions that went up throughout my adulthood after I left, we used to have horse farms and wetlands and creeks and streams and just trees and just a bunch of nature. And I was kind of an only child in the sense that I was the youngest of four. My siblings had all kind of, there's a huge decade, and a decade is a decade, but this felt like a really big decade between me and my siblings in age. And so I was kind of playing by myself all the time, and I found comfort and I found company whenever I was outside, just like you. It was like, oh, this is the one place where I could sing to the spiders and I could sing to the trees, and I would could make the rocks my friends. And it was just, it kept me company. And so I didn't realize, obviously, at the time when I was a little kid, how much I was really getting from that experience. And I also didn't know that that was going to inform the rest of my life. You know, you fast forward several decades, 5 decades, I'm proud to say, and here I am working in an organization like Trust for Public Land when we're trying to connect people to the joys and benefits of the outdoors and nature. So it's like, it truly feels like it's my calling. It was established in my childhood. It's really important.
Thank you so much for sharing all that. I also didn't know it was going to inform the rest of my life. And honestly, I took a lot of side quests before coming back, but I'm so happy to be here exactly because of what you're talking about and exactly because I am happiest outside. And once you know those benefits, you want more people to feel them and to enjoy them, right? And you told me about being in Utah in the 90s, snowboarding and skiing for a decade. And in your own words, you said you are essentially the only Black woman in the entire mountain. So take us back there. What was that like for you? And what were you yet to imagine about that space?
Yeah, it's funny. I moved to Utah from Chicago on a whim. I had moved to Chicago and had become very close friends with a woman. I'm going to actually send her this episode so she can know that.
Nice.
the impact that she had on my life. We were drinking some Guinness in Chicago, and she said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, I'm leaving Chicago and I'm going to go to Utah." Utah was not a state that had ever crossed my mind ever at that stage. I think I was 20 or 21 because I was drinking Guinness. And and it was something that didn't cross my mind, but I knew I didn't want to be in Chicago anymore. And I said, "I want to come." She said, "Okay." And she went to a payphone and called the person who had hired her and said, "Hey, I have another friend who wants to come. Can she have a job?" And the person's like, "Yeah, we'll take all the hands we can get." I said, "Okay, let's go." And 4 of us loaded up into a 4-door Golf GTI and drove from Chicago to Salt Lake City to Little Cottonwood Canyon.
Love this.
It was 1991, and I was just approaching my 22nd birthday. I do remember well, and I didn't know what I was setting myself up for. I didn't know that decision to say yes was going to change the rest of my life. I was there. I was having a lot of culture shock. I was the only person of color for miles and miles and miles. And then I started to see a couple of us start to pop up here and there. I realized that this is what love feels like. And that love actually came from the mountains. And so I hadn't skied before. Snowboarding wasn't even really a thing at that time.
Right.
I took to it so fast. We used to have these weekly giant slalom races on the mountain, and I started being a forerunner for all of those races because I had so much skill and talent at the time where I was helped setting up the courses because of the turns and the speed, and it just became something I couldn't step away from. So fast forward, I was there for a decade. This is kind of a long story. I'll try to make it quick. But throughout time and time again, I was singled out. And I don't think anybody necessarily had any bad intentions, but I was such an anomaly that people's curiosity wasn't the type of curiosity that I wanted them to have. They didn't want to know like who I am in terms of my character. They wanted to know why I was there and how I got there, as though I had to really justify being there because I wasn't like everybody else on the mountain. And I just ended up being motivated by people who were implying that I didn't belong there, which ended up making me a better skier and then a better snowboarder because it was like, oh no, I belong here. This is my mountain too. This is my outdoors too. This is my region too. This is also my sport. And I just committed myself to it and I stepped into it. But I've got to say, the thing that to answer your question, the thing that I didn't imagine was that 10 years, 20 years later, there were going to be all of these new organizations and leaders of color who were stepping up and saying, "Oh no, this is our space too." And I didn't know how much I needed folks like you. I didn't know how much I needed Outdoor Afro, Latino Outdoors, Brown Girls Climb. I didn't know how much I needed them until everybody started popping up. And now I'm just so honored to see what has emerged.
And I think something that you're bringing up about the evolution of snow sports and the space and the reclaiming of that space from diverse communities like Latino Outdoors, Outdoor Afro, and others that you mentioned, that in a way must have been so unprecedented, right? Like for me, I've already had that leadership ahead of me pave the way, that in a way that when I entered this space, I had so much more awareness, and I knew that there were groups of people that look like me that are doing this, right? And I come in with the privilege of just having the understanding of why that's important. Historically, this has not been the case. Today, we are here to break ground and reclaim spaces that should have always been for us too.
Having a really amazing group of BIPOC women and just women in general to uplift my own spirits and make me feel like, imposter syndrome hits us all in certain ways. And for me, this has made me feel so included and so powerful. And yeah, I'm just really excited.
So
her story is why we do what we do. Yeah, so I'm sure after this experience, a lot of you all will have very similar stories about this community and how it welcomes you and how you always can fall back to the Women of Winter community.
There is also that respect and the love that I have for all of the people who have been, launching. You got Boys in the Woods, you got Camping to Connect, you got Black Outside, you got all of these incredible organizations. I'm so proud that they had the foresight that I didn't have. I was, again, too busy just surviving and trying to get through and prove myself. And I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that those our peers kind of laid the way, and now you can come and we can continue to build with each other, for each other, and for those who, are yet to be born. So
the mission is being accomplished, right? It's slightly easier for every generation, not to say that the barriers are gone, but to say the progress is seen, it's felt, and the impact is there, right? So you have 30 years of snowboarding. For the last 10, you told me it's been a little bit inconsistent, and suddenly you decide, at this stage of my life, with arthritis in my knees, I'm going to get certified as a snowboarding instructor in Montana with 20 or 30 some strangers. And I just want you to illustrate what that moment was like for you.
So today is day one of testing. We've spent the last 2 days learning new terms and technology, approaches, a lot of acronyms. Today is going to be the time where we are working one-on-one with an evaluator who's going to be giving us scores ranking from 1 to 6. We have to score an average of a 4 in order to graduate from this program. And so it's a first time for all of us, all 30-something of us, skiers and snowboarders, and we're nervous, but we're excited, and we also realize that we know what we know. I think one of the elements that I'm most looking forward to is the personal analysis that we have to do, where we're going to be asked to perform a task on the snow, and then we need to talk about how we did and breaking it down into assessments. And so it's self-reflection, it's humility, but it's also an opportunity to celebrate the things that we really feel like we mastered. So I think at the end of the day, they want us to do well, they want us to be successful. So just knowing that going into it has us all feeling a lot better about it. First, I was thinking about, age is just a number. That's a thing that we say. Like you see it in all of the media feeds, blah, 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 right? And I abide by that, I think it's true, but I also needed to prove it. I was curious to see if I still got it. Like, can I get up there? Do I really have what it takes to be certified? So when this was presented to me as an opportunity, it came through one of my friends that's associated and a member of the National Brotherhood of Snow Sports, which is also an incredible organization that's been around since 1972. And I encourage everybody to look it up. They're amazing. So this partnership included the National Brotherhood of Snow Sports, that we just affectionately just call NBS. And I was like, well, shucks, it can't be so bad. If it's getting endorsed by NBS, then I'm certainly going to pursue it. And I have another friend who went through it as a skier last year. And so it had credibility. So I did it. I was curious. I wanted to see how much does age really matter when we're talking about diversity and equity and inclusion and justice. Sometimes in some spaces, certainly not in this one, we also don't think about age diversity.
Correct.
And when I was thinking about some of the women I call us women of a certain age, who were out in this world just trying to stay healthy, trying to stay whole, sometimes going into these spaces to learn a new sport or a new activity, a new hobby, can be intimidating when you have these incredibly able-bodied, young, sprightly people trying to lead you along the way who don't have any recognition what it means to have to stop because your knees hurt, right? You're having a flare-up, or your lower back is hurting, or whatever the case might be. And it felt important to me to represent women of a certain age in this space.
My name's Darby. Gosh, I've been teaching over 20 years. I do not feel old enough to say that, but it is true.
I got her beat. I'm old enough to have just retired from the Army after 32 years. I'm like just don't look it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, women of color, we know the black
Hey.
Anyway,
I wanted to set myself up so that I could be a resource for them at any point in time. So, yeah, it was like, who am I? Am I really who I say I am in terms of this? Like, I know I'm an advocate, but am I still an athlete? Am I still capable? Can I still connect? You know, so I was really questioning myself and my abilities in a big way.
Well, I am personally so grateful that you got through all the questioning of the abilities and just tried it, because for me, I'm in my late 30s and I'm already sometimes like the elder in some of these outdoor spaces
Mm-hmm.
where you don't really get the diversity of age. And something that I had noticed though with skiing is that there's people of all ages, and then there's definitely a lot of elders on the mountain, which I love because that tells me I have a long way to go. I started skiing when I was 35. So that's just 2 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
Just 2 years ago. And arriving in Montana with the same questions that you had, like, am I pushing it here? Is this okay? I feel good in my body. But of course, I'm starting to feel the knees, the back, the old injuries that come back. Suddenly I'm there, and then I see women across generations on both sides of me. And that was so reassuring. That was so empowering, inspiring. And that's just us telling each other, and at any time you can make the decision, you can put the effort, and we lift each other up in that other space of diversity that is so often taboo as well, right? Like, we don't really address how age changes the way that you relate to the outdoors and relate to the spaces that much. And maybe this is a great time for me to ask you, because we were both in Montana at the same time, but I was in the skiing discipline, you were in the snowboarding, and you already talked a little bit about the range of folks that were there from the perspective of age, but I'm also interested in you describing who was in that space with you beyond the age, right? We know there was age diversity, but who else was there with you? Because I feel like the range of people and stories that we got to be with was very broad, but it was also what gave the experience the most meaning.
Yeah, it was funny. There was one sister who she was like a sprite. She was so effervescent in her energy, and she was a fantastic snowboarder. And she actually lives here in Colorado. She lives down in Crested Butte. Shout out Nunu.
Yeah, Nunu.
Hi everyone, my name is Nunu. Originally I'm from South Africa. What brings me joy? What brings me joy? It's tough because snowboarding brings me all the joy. Yeah, it's really, really, really tough. But in the summer I would love to actually get into alpineering. Yeah, so I'm starting to actually like hike around and do all the other small mountains we have. So the goal is to actually like do Portinez and catch a sunset there one day. So yeah, and I'm so happy to be here. Yeah.
And she had these really, really long Senegalese twists installed in her hair that were like down to the back of her calf. And, I'm hearing stories that there are, people who wanted to touch her hair. I think in some ways she's a lot more generous in spirit than I am anymore. And I think it's probably because I've had people wanting to touch my hair for as long as she has been alive, right?
Right.
And so it's something I'm just kind of over. And I think she has more generosity of spirit, as I said, when somebody wants to, present her with that question. And I was just thinking to myself, see, this is why we're here, right? We need to normalize our presence so that people don't need to be curious about these things. And it was a demonstration of the lack of diversity, not only on the mountain, but in people's individual lives. And that can be based on geography. It could be based on the line of work, and it could be based on choice. Right. And I think the more that we can be present and seen and accounted for, the less outside the box will seem. When you get into the mountains, there's the in group and there's an out group. And to be in this space with these women who have these lived experience, we had queer folks with us, right? Who were living into their lives, their best selves. And, one woman who had just literally flown in from from China, excuse me, the night before. And she was just going to, hang out and she was in the snowboarding discipline and she was going to get her business done. Right. And there was just so much. We had another young lady who came out from St. Louis. She was like, listen, in the Lou, we don't have mountains. We have a valley, and that's where we play, right? So for her, being up in these big mountains, in Montana was something completely different from anything that she had ever had exposure to. And so it was the diversity of experiences, diversity of kind of the cultural context of how things kind of play out when you come to these places that traditionally don't include us. So it was really powerful to just be an observer in a lot of ways and to hear various stories that friends were sharing throughout, the 4 or 5 days that we were together. It was interesting.
Yeah. Wow. How rich, right? Just to be able to spend almost a week with that diversity, with rich diversity of women and queer folks, and thinking about how each unique experience made this the better for everybody.
The other thing I will say is geography matters. I think Montana, and this is not an indictment on one of the most beautiful states in the country, Montana is a very special place with a very different demographic for the most part. Here's the thing that I thought was really fascinating. When we took the shuttle from the valley where we were staying up to the resort itself, that was actually, and to me it was ironic based on my own lived experiences, I saw so many African immigrants who were either on the bus or working at the grocery store in the village who I wanted to engage with, to ask them, how are you? Are you safe? Do you feel like you belong? Because you didn't see them on the mountain, right? You saw them on the shuttle and you knew that they were working somewhere. They were all going to work. So what's my point here? It's like you are on the shuttle. You're here as an immigrant. You are here to make some money, to earn a quality living. Then is there some sort of disconnect between what other folks are experiencing on the mountain and what you're doing for your service, for your job? Like, who is extending a hand to you to say, come play with me outside? So it was like, there was a interesting compulsion that I had on the van or on the shuttle, like to not only say like, how are you? Is everything, are you being held and loved here? But also, is anybody giving you an invitation to come snowboard or skiing? Like, is there a program that's set up for the folks that are working behind the lines or working front lines to be involved in the recreational sport of this? You know what I mean? And it just gave me more curiosity about what their lived experiences were, how welcomed they felt. Did they truly feel like they belonged when they were on the mountain? So and they were completely outside of the cohort and the experience that we were having, but I saw them and I wanted to engage with them, but I was also being really sensitive to not wanting to other them in my attempt to be inclusive. And that can be a kind of a mixed bag, right? When I'm sitting here saying, I don't want people to be curious about me. And then at the same time, holding that same curiosity for these other folks who physically look more like me, but culturally have less in common, right? And so it was a tough juxtaposition for me, because I felt a little bit hypocritical with my curiosity, because I resented when people are curious about me, but at the same time, I wanted to be curious about them and see what I could do to ensure that they were doing all right, you know?
Well, and the key point here being, you knew that your curiosity didn't entitle you to ask questions.
That part.
Which I think it's important to name.
That part.
I have a little story to actually follow up to this, because I got to meet somebody, an African-American person that was working as a sous chef in one of the lodges.
Okay.
And after me and another cohort sister gave them a pep talk, they decided they're really going to go try snowboarding. But the barrier was Not that there aren't programs for employees to go out there or whatever, but because there are so many return employees, everybody's already so much more advanced than you are, that sometimes the barrier internally is, well, I don't want to have to ask my friends to slow down for me. Well, my ego gets hurt when I see the little kids doing this better than me, right? And obviously, like and if you are working at a small mountain for the first time, that may be different. But Big Sky is huge sky. I've never been in a mountain with 40 lifts before.
I know.
That to me was just like, wow, this is at least 4 or 5 times bigger than where I normally ski. So opportunities are there, and then the invitation continues to be so important, right? Even with most of the barriers removed. It's like invitation and sharing the stoke, right? Because that's what me and my cohort sister did, Hanan. It was me and Hanan.
Yes.
Just like, you have to do this. You're here. You have no idea the kind of opportunity that it is. Like, just go for it. Like, push through it. Change to skis if you feel like snowboarding is not happening for you. Like, we were there just to really make the invitation that felt like was missing from that person.
So that's the important part of belonging, and it's just so important. And I wish that we could go back, and maybe we can, and maybe we can talk about that later in this conversation. I don't know.
Yes. Well, and back to TPL's Happiest Outside, the whole idea is that both joy and struggle can live in the same moment. And as outdoorsy people, we know that very deeply and very well. You said something along the lines of like, it's because you are happiest outside that you continue showing up. And even when showing up is hard, even when the space doesn't quite fit yet and you're feeling like you're conforming just to belong and be there. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, what keeps you going?
All right. Good morning, everybody. It is day 2 of testing. The fact that I'm here means that I'm on the right path. It means that the likelihood of me successfully obtaining my certification is a little more real today than it was yesterday. So I'm feeling really good about that.
Ready for the day.
How's everybody feeling about today? How you feeling?
Good.
Who's got this?
We do.
Who's got this?
We are women with
You protect what means the most to you. You protect what you love. And when you are outside and you feel the love of the wind, right? The awe that you encounter sometimes when you're on a trail and you see some things or some vistas that you can't even find language for, it's like, oh no, this is meaning. This gives my life meaning. And then if I'm lucky enough to have that meaning be translated into purpose, oh my gosh, it doesn't get any better than that, right? So it's like, I think that the outdoors just continue to feed me. And I know, listen, you're working every day, you're doing what you're doing. We're sitting in front of these computers, we're talking all day long. We're problem solving, we're imagining, we're creating all those things. Yes. And there's a point in the day, I know for both of us, and probably for a lot of people listening to this conversation, when it's like, let me just get up and go outside. It's like, that's just a default response. Like my body's like, go touch grass. And that's become kind of a trendy thing to say, but it's real. Go outside. I remember, this might be TMI for the audience, but I don't care. I used to be in a marriage.
Nice. Bring it.
I used to be in a marriage, and I'm so grateful that I have just a loving relationship with this individual still to this day. But one of the things that we discovered for us was when there were those really, really difficult conversations that had to happen, we would have a practice of, you know what, we should probably have this conversation outside. Let's pack up the car. Let's go to the closest trail. And this is in Portland, so it wasn't that hard to like hit, what was it, Washington Park. And it was like being able to have those conversations that were otherwise going to be hard to get to the other side of while we're walking on a trail, while we're engaging with nature and while we're moving our bodies, it served as a diffuser, right? It de-escalated the tension, it de-escalated whatever kind of emotions that we had that were sitting at the surface. It allowed us to slow our pace, to kind of check in with what we were really thinking and feeling. And so again, it's medicine. I guess that's just an easier way for me to say it. Being outside is medicine. I want to be well, which means I need to be taking medicine. And when I'm taking that medicine, I am happiest outside.
So well said. As you're talking about showing up, and I'm also here showing up, there's still a privilege to showing up, right? And so you went to Big Sky, and let's just name it. It is an expensive place to be. Even with some support, you're still need to provide some sort of resource investment on your end, right? And we know women in our cohort, we were sharing beds with strangers. We were sleeping on couches. Because the cost barrier is real, even when you're willing to go into debt for it, like I did. I just put it on my credit card. I was like, well, if I get to do this with all women of color, it shall be worth it. And
yes,
I just sent it. So what does it mean to say we're building a more inclusive snow sports community when the price of entry and the sacrifice of entry is still very high? And I'm wondering how you're sitting with that contradiction after this experience.
I got to tell you, I had so many thoughts, feelings, reactions, and mental solutions, not applied solutions to this, because I think the term accessibility is used very loosely sometimes. I think the intention behind access is a very positive one, but actually activating access is something else entirely. And so, yes, the privilege of being able to go and experience this, to be able to just, buy a plane ticket and find some friends like you and a couple of other gals to share a shuttle to get up there, and was very, very real. And I think that it's a both and situation for me. It is something that I wasn't going to deny based on some principle that maybe I was having. Like, I wasn't going to say, I'm not going to go because everybody can't come with me, which is what I wish I could say, right? But if I wanted to say that, that also would have meant that I needed to bring the solution with me in order to enable that, in order to make that a reality. And so there was a woman from she's still in my life, but we don't work together before. I'm going to shout her out. Her name is Monica Lewis Patrick. She's in Detroit. She's the founder of We the People of Detroit. And she and one of her co-founders created the term solutionary. I want to be a solutionary. I want to see the vision and I want to bring the solution, and put it to action. And so, yes, there was a huge contradiction there that was happening for me as somebody who is, quote unquote, like an expert in equity and all of this work. Oh man, I can't take this information back with me and not try to find collaborators to figure out a way to make it a little bit better. And by better, I just really mean, this is not a criticism of the program at all. I'm grateful to have participated, but we had 32. Can we have 100? What would it take to have 100? Oh, maybe we need to go someplace that doesn't have as many cost prohibitions, right? Maybe we need to think about doing it at a different time of the year when we're not competing with other factors there's a lot of questions to ask about the model. So it was rough. It was challenging. I mean, it was hard for me sometimes. I had a place of privilege when I was listening to some of our friends who were like, I've got a whole loaf of bread. I'm going to be fine for the week. Like, what? No. Right. That's not good, sis. You need sustenance. You need vegetables. You need to be able to keep your body fueled in a really healthful way. So there were, I made some contributions. I made some offerings on an individual basis, and that was the best I could do in the moment, and respecting people's privacy. But it didn't feel like enough for me. And that's part of why we're having this conversation, right?
Sure.
So we can be imagining an evolved way. Yeah. There's so much opportunity. The demographics of the United States are changing every moment, right? So how reflective are we going to be in making sure that we build a system that reflects that? Would you be
Here with
interested?
you. I'm already signed up, Rhonda. I'll just come along. We'll build, put bricks on top of what's been built. We'll do all the things. I think I think it's so worth it. I think I would love to be a mentor to the next generation when I am,
Yes.
ready and qualified to do that part. Absolutely. And also, I'm so grateful for the folks that did that for us, because I feel like there was, at least from my personal experience, because I cannot talk for everybody, but in my experience, the people who coached us, guided us, and evaluated us, they brought so much knowledge, so much care, and so much understanding that I felt safe throughout. And that was beautiful. And being in the company of a cohort of all women of color was so powerful that I can only imagine how much more powerful that experience can be once we are the ones leading and supporting the entire process, which I think it's actually the reason why this program got started, because the gap of not having women of color to teach women of color on the mountain. So we're here to build that next step.
All right, everybody, this is it. Everybody's finished. We've got a whole bunch of us getting on to do a group ride together in celebration of everything that we've just been through the last 4 days. It's pretty exciting. This is a really beautiful thing, and super grateful to be a part of it, especially successfully.
It is with great joy and pride that I welcome you to this special occasion, the Women of Winter 2026 Award Ceremony and Celebration.
This might be the last question. I'm asking it very seriously. We have definitely joked and loosely dreamed about this, but if we both were to build something together, what might that look like? What's the pitch? Now, you just asked me about units, but like, give me the pitch. Like,
I mean, I think we go back to the purpose of this conversation, which is what makes you happiest outside, and opening the door for people to find the language and the experience for that. People don't know what they don't know until you give them the opportunity, right? It's amazing what happens when you give people exposure and the true meaning of access, how it changes how you view the world. And so I think we would do a 2.0, again, building on the bricks. It would be something that is economically accessible. I would even aspire to have it be free. I would aspire for it to be something where people had full sponsorships that covered their travel, their meals, the training, the certification. And then I would also have an off-ramp for them. So now you've gone through this experience, what comes next for you? And have it be a continuous cycle, right? Where people can see a long pathway that will take them into the decades of their life. So I think we know what the problem is. We know around accessibility. We know about representation. Easy. Got it. We know it. This is why we do the work that we do. We're already aware. But I think that there's an opportunity to make this really compelling. And maybe it starts one conversation at a time. I think we start by asking questions of our peers, is this something that you'd be interested in? And then we go to the people that have the resources and we say, can you support us? I don't know. I think it's because I'm optimistic to the point of being naive sometimes. I just don't know who would not say yes.
Something that I really appreciate from this framing that you're offering is that it's not going to be Rhonda and Gabacha coming to people telling them this is it. It's more like community in. What does the community want? What does the community need? And even for me, a little step further, because I think by the time you're going to get level 1 certified, you've already invested in the access, right? So backtracking that, like the folks that may want to see themselves there, but they haven't even taken the first step to be on the mountain, right? Like how do we reach the people in the community with the little amber inside of them that makes them enjoy the skiing videos on Instagram or YouTube, but perhaps have never stepped in a ski boot or a snowboard boot or even at a ski resort, right? And then like really building that access from the bottom up in a way. And I'm saying that because we live in a hierarchical society, culture, structures. So like attending to the folks that need it the most and building from there for everybody.
And maybe it doesn't even have to be in the snow to begin with. Like maybe it's just a relationship with the mountain. Like once you are on a mountain, regardless of the time of year, then you become a little more curious. Like, oh, I can't imagine what this would be like in snow. But gosh, I sure do love it here. I love the people who work on this mountain, you know, as I've been hiking in July and I've seen these things and I've eaten this food and I saw how easy it was to get here. Or I saw there's a bus system here in Denver or in Colorado. I think it's called the Mustang bus or something like that, where you don't even have to spend a lot of money to get to the mountain. We've got a train. You can hop on the train to go down to Winter Park and it costs $9. Right?
Wow.
It takes you straight to the mountain. You get on the train here at Union Station. You're on it for an hour and a half. You pay $9 and you get right off at the foot of the mountain, right? Like tell me that's not an opportunity to take advantage of and leverage, right? So we got to find the leverage points and we have to recognize that it doesn't just have to happen in the wintertime.
Well, Rhonda, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for inviting me to host this episode and to put you on the hot seat for a change.
I appreciate you taking the invitation and having this conversation with me. I think it's only appropriate that you do our outro. Usually it's me, but why don't you go ahead and do our outro? Take us out just like you brought us in.
All right. People, Nature, Big Ideas is produced by Trust for Public Land in partnership with Pretty Good Productions. Our executive producer is Thomas Clayton Miller. Shout out to Thomas. Our senior producer is Deborah Williams. Shout out to Deborah. And our associate producer is Alisa Murley. Shout out, Alisa. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.